Space is huge and will require enormous efforts to develop and settle. If humanity must stand together to survive, we might already be doomed, because disagreement is our oldest tradition. But history suggests we ought to do our best work when we are arguing. Do we need to be unified to survive and settle space? We often imagine humanity spreading to the stars as one great family, but families don't always get along. When we picture the future, it's easy to assume we need to set aside our differences, pool our resources, and march forward under a single banner if we want to survive and expand beyond Earth. After all, colonizing space is hard. It takes cooperation, coordination, and a willingness to work together on projects that can last generations. Developing space will be a task like no other. It took thousands of years to settle every corner of Earth, and even Mars alone would dwarf every prior human endeavor. Yet history suggests a more complicated picture. Humanity's greatest accomplishments have often emerged not from unity, but from rivalry, from the desire to outdo, to prove, to compete. The Cold War space race, which gave us Apollo, satellites, and the foundations of the modern space age, was driven less by brotherhood than by fear and pride. And even today, most of our advances come from countless independent actors following their own interests, not from global consensus. And for many, unity simply means my way or the highway. Still, many argue that the challenges ahead, artificial intelligence, climate control, resource scarcity, or defending against asteroids, demands a level of unity humanity has never achieved. It is an appealing idea. One species, one purpose, one destiny. But appealing doesn't necessarily mean realistic or even desirable. I tend to suspect that while unity helps, it's far from necessary, and might even come with more downsides than upsides, and we'll try to examine the various perspectives neutrally today and present the case for them. So today we'll be looking at 5 ways to frame the question. Case 1. Yes, humanity must be unified to survive. Case 2. No, but unity helps a lot. Case 3. No, it's largely neutral, some benefits, some downsides. Case 4. No, unity hurts more than it helps. And finally, case number 5. No, we actually need to remain divided. And again, each view has its strengths and its weaknesses, and by exploring them we can better understand what kind of civilization might actually thrive among the stars. Because if the future of humanity depends on unity, we ought to be certain we know what kind we mean, and what price we're willing to pay for it. Case 1. Yes, unity is necessary. There is a powerful case to be made that humanity must unite if we want to survive and build a true interplanetary or interstellar civilization. In many ways, it's not the case for unity to get to space, but for unity to survive in general, let alone achieve any grand projects. This is probably the most optimistic and in many ways the most comforting of all the viewpoints we'll consider, or the most horrifying, depending on if we got some wonderful Star Trek Federation utopia, or something more like the spirit-crushing Federation from Blake 7, or the nightmare fuel that is the Imperium of Warhammer 40,000. And it bears noting that both of those are arguably way better at getting plants settled than the Federation from Star Trek is. Brutal oligarchies and autocracies tend to be pretty good at achieving their goals, albeit sometimes that's seen how high they can get their pyramid of skulls. We should also note that being unified to settle space is not necessarily total or eternal. The ability to unify to get the job done isn't necessarily halted because Switzerland says no, or some breakaway island nation or asteroid colony does. Nor does it mean you need something that can't fall apart later on. We see this both with Isaac Asimov's Foundation and Frank Herbert's Dune. They arguably rely heavily on a centralized empire to get the galaxy tamed, but later have to break apart, at least temporarily, to save humanity. In the optimistic case, which is certainly more pleasant to contemplate, it imagines a future where humanity sets aside its tribal and national divisions, recognizing that our shared fate outweighs our differences. From this perspective, the obstacles to space settlement are not just technological or economic, they are political and social. Launching a mission to Mars or building a Dyson swarm may require huge efforts, but also requires global trust, stable cooperation, and a shared sense of purpose. A united humanity could marshal its collective resources and intellect toward these grand projects without wasting effort on duplication, secrecy, or war. An openly combative humanity is rough on space development. Major wars are not times of long-term investment, and space programs tend to follow in the same vein. Worse still, spacecraft are ridiculously vulnerable to attack, whether in orbit or far from home. Engines when on are as subtle as explosions, and a ship that shuts off its engines in space does not become invisible. It simply moves along a fixed, predictable trajectory until it fires them again, and when it does, any observer can easily reacquire it. A pursuing missile or warship with an identical drive system can usually reach twice the velocity, since it can spend all its fuel accelerating instead of saving it to slow down. They only need to carry a payload designed around busting a starship and its countermeasures, whereas whoever they are chasing has to devote cargo to fighting them off and achieving their other mission. A colony ship, by contrast, is a big, bulky craft that must decelerate to complete its mission. A weapon does not, so it's far cheaper, by orders of magnitude, to destroy a nascent space colony than to build one. That means no single nation can colonize space without at least the tacit approval of its rivals. An early rush to claim planets, asteroids, or nearby star systems simply is not viable. Other powers need not like your efforts, only see them as a potential threat, and interfering will be relatively easy and cheap. Thus, it's not merely that one country cannot colonize space when most others oppose it. You need nearly everyone on board, or at least agree not to shoot your ships down out of fear the next launch might be an ICBM aimed at their cities. A small country that bucks that approval to send out a fleet of self-replicating colony ships to claim all the stars is very much presenting itself as an existential threat and a target for the others. There's also the existential argument that our survival as a species depends on coordination. We already live in a world where one individual, one nation, or even one careless algorithm could unleash global catastrophe. The next century might add superintelligent AI, nanotechnology, or bioweapons to that list, dangers that can only be mitigated through mutual restraint and shared oversight. In that sense, Unity isn't just idealism, it's survival engineering. You cannot travel space if you are dead, after all. Well, unless you're frozen on a cryogenic ark, but then the intent is to bring you back from the dead. See that episode. The same logic applies to planetary defense. A single rogue asteroid or comet could wipe out our civilization, and defending against that benefits from global cooperation, not just in funding and technology, but in trust. After all, the same spacecraft that could nudge an asteroid away would also nudge one toward target. True unity would let us coordinate these efforts without paranoia or geopolitical gamesmanship. Beyond the practical, there's the philosophical appeal. A unified humanity carries a moral clarity that fragmented civilizations often lack. It's easier to see ourselves as caretakers of Earth and stewards of life when we stop thinking in terms of us versus them. That's part of what made the image of Apollo 8's Earthrise so powerful. For the first time, humanity saw itself as one small, fragile world, not a collection of flags. Now we can rebut that by pointing out that Apollo was during the Cold War, and the space race was not a friendly competition, even if less hostile than some others. But part of what defined that war and that space race was that it was not the US versus Russia. They were just the prime movers of a pair of competing hegemonies. NATO and the Free States versus the Warsaw Pact and its allies. At least in principle, both were aiming for a unified and improved world. The US was making the case that Apollo was a shared success for all mankind, and so was the Soviet Union. Either might have enjoyed less success if they weren't viewing it as a way to impress, inspire, and recruit from abroad, not just domestically. Science fiction often echoes this hope. Star Trek famously imagines a world where humanity unites after the horrors of global conflict, and goes on to form the United Federation of Planets, a civilization of cooperation, exploration, and mutual respect. It's an inspiring vision, yet the details are a little murky, and one that shaped much of how we think about the future of space exploration. But while this view has deep emotional and ethical appeal, it carries assumptions worth questioning. It presumes that unity is both achievable and sustainable. The single global system could govern billions without corruption, oppression, or stagnation. It assumes that consensus among peoples of vastly different cultures and moral viewpoints is possible, and if it is, that this is more valuable than competition, and the unified culture wouldn't lose the creative tension that drives discovery. Still, the idea of unity endures because it represents the best of our aspirations, the belief that if we can finally stop fighting ourselves, we might be capable of anything. And while the universe may not require us to be unified, many feel it would be a better place if it were. There are also many shades of unity between a unified hive mind and people agreeing tacitly not to kill each other. Case 2. No, but it helps. It's easy to agree that unity has its uses, even if it isn't strictly required. Most of humanity's biggest successes were not product of everyone working together, but of enough people choosing not to get in each other's way. We might not need a single world government to build starships, but we probably need the kind of world where a launch doesn't trigger an arms race, let alone open hostility. We'd like to trade ideas, not missiles. And it is worth noting that if you're a spacefarer at all, it means you're also very good at making rockets and missiles. In practice, we already live in a world of partial unity. The International Space Station is maintained by nations that once pointed nuclear weapons at each other, and indeed presumably still do so. The Artemis Accords allow a dozen countries with very different cultures and interests to collaborate on lunar exploration. Global science routinely shares data across political lines. These are not signs of a species that's unified. They are signs of a species that's learned to cooperate where it matters. I can also say that at least currently, there's a pretty strong attitude of pro-space cooperation internationally. I was a little surprised when I became the president of the National Space Society that I enjoy permanent observer status at the UN as a result. Our organization works closely with UNOSA, the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, and while UNOSA doesn't help launch spacecraft themselves, they help keep the pathway smooth for others. And on that matter, let me take a quick moment to thank my friends Dr. Rick Janae, Colonel Carlton Johnston, and the rest of our international committee for the vital and under-celebrated work they and UNOSA do. One thing the NSS realized very early on is that space works better when more folks feel invested and involved, and that's why we are an international organization. At a practical level, UNI helps because it lowers transaction costs. Every border, embargo, and conflicting regulation adds friction. Space programs are expensive enough without having to navigate political red tape or duplicated R&D. Or that if a ship makes an emergency landing, wherever it drops into won't shoot it down or seize its crew and contents, which might be a very real issue in early asteroid mining when a re-entry pod carrying 100 tons of gold might flop down in unexpected places. When we pool knowledge, we can specialize. When we trust that someone else won't sabotage the mission, we can plan more easily for decades instead of election cycles. The peace dividend matters too. Every dollar not spent on weapons or deterrence can go toward telescopes, launch systems, and colonization infrastructure, though as a caveat, a lot of the budget for space thus far has come through defense spending rather than other government spending sectors or private funding. Economic interdependence already provides a kind of soft unity, where nations might bicker but are too entangled to risk outright war. A similar web of shared interests could extend into space, commercial, scientific, and logistical partnerships that make it costly to fight and profitable to cooperate. The key is that unity does not have to mean uniformity. We can sign treaties, share markets, and coordinate planetary defense without erasing languages, cultures, or political systems. The world does not need to be homogeneous to work together, it just needs enough mutual benefit to keep everyone at the table. The European Space Agency is an example of this, although its accomplishments thus far are minor compared to national-level organizations like NASA, and they are new and growing quickly in skill and accomplishment. Still, cooperation has limits. Alliances are fragile, and even friendly nations can change course overnight. The same shared networks that spread cooperation can also spread conflict, and when unity becomes too bureaucratic, it can slow progress rather than speed it. Many great projects have benefited from someone willing to break ranks and try a different approach, so unity helps immensely, but it is a tool, not a prerequisite. Humanity can thrive with a patchwork of partnerships, overlapping interests, and occasional rivalries, so long as we remember that no one gets the stars entirely alone. Case number 3. No, it's fairly neutral. Some would argue that unity and division largely cancel out, and they're just different arrangements of the same underlying drive. Human civilization moves forward because individuals and groups pursue goals, and sometimes those goals align, sometimes they clash. In the long run, technology, environment, and adaptability matter far more than whether we're politically unified. From this perspective, space settlement is less about cooperation and more about capacity. If energy is cheap, automation advanced, and resources abundant, then small groups, or even individuals, could colonize independently. 1 million autonomous habitats built by local cooperatives, corporations, or AI-run collectives might do more to spread humanity than any grand government program. The universe might reward resilience and redundancy, not central planning. Unity might make certain projects easier, planetary defense grids or interstellar beacons, but those can emerge organically, the way the internet did, through mutual interest and shared standards, not imposed order. A dozen independent civilizations could still exchange data, or trade fusion fuel and antimatter the way today's nations exchange electricity across borders. Evolution teaches the same lesson. Life endures through diversity and adaptability. When one niche collapses, another fills it. Civilizations operate the same way. A monolithic, unified humanity might be elegant, but it would also be brittle. A Darwinian environment of rough competition is hardly without its own issues too, and that's why we have social and cooperative life forms and civilizations. Benefits to each exist, and while they probably do not exactly cancel out, cooperation and competition both have benefits, and in certain niches, one will tend to do better than the other too. And an absence or deficiency in either can be far worse. Extreme division can lead to chaos, while absolute unity can lead to stagnation. But in moderate doses, both competition and cooperation seem self-balancing. Where trust breaks down, markets and deterrence step in. Where rivalry grows too costly, treaties and norms re-emerge. Over centuries, the balance tends to hold. So perhaps unity and division are less opposing forces and more like gravity and pressure in a star, each restraining the other and together creating stability. A unified humanity might build Dyson swarms faster, but diverse humanity is more likely to survive long enough to fill them. When we talk about if we need unity to tackle space development, it is a reminder that unity can be a very bad thing if you live under a mad tyrant. If you want a sobering modern look at what happens when restraint fails, watch real-life lore's original series, Mad Kings, on Nebula. Documentaries about unstable rulers and the real consequences of concentrated authority. That's out now on Nebula, along with every episode of SFIA, including tons of bonus content like our monthly full-length exclusive episodes, such as this month's Chrono-Engineering. Right now, Nebula is running a huge discount. With my link or the QR code on the screen, you get 50% off a yearly plan, just $30 for the whole year, about $250 a month, and new members get a 3-day free trial, so you can check out Chrono-Engineering and Mad Kings for free. Head to go.nebula.tv/IsaacArthur and get access to tons of content from myself and many other awesome creators. Case number 4. No, unity hurts. The Cold War case. There is a strong argument that unity doesn't just fail to help, it can actually get in the way. History is full of examples where rivalry and competition spurred faster progress than any cooperative consensus could have managed. The Cold War space race is the obvious case in point. Two rival superpowers, neither of which would have poured the resources or urgency into space exploration if the other had not existed. Though as a caveat, a lot of the urgency of developing space travel hinged on our fears of atomizing ourselves. A peaceful world, unified or not, might take longer to get to space, but probably keeps developing technology, and without the worrisome concern we might all be dead if we take too long. Life is also about more than just survival, and comfort's a big factor that you find a lot more in peaceful environments than warlike ones. So an absence of unity is not the same as open warfare or even hostility. Nonetheless, NASA was born from fear as much as curiosity. Sputnik's beeps didn't just echo across the night sky, they sent tremors through the halls of government. Within a decade, that rivalry gave us orbital satellites, the first humans in space, and the moon landing. Had there been a unified global space agency, it's doubtful they'd have gotten authorization for such costly and risky programs so quickly. Committees rarely beat competition to the launch pad. Competition doesn't just drive speed, it drives creativity. Rival powers, companies, and individuals take different approaches, which means some of them will fail spectacularly, but others will stumble on breakthroughs no centralized plan would have risked funding. Diversity of methods, driven by pride and ambition, creates redundancy and innovation at once. You can afford boldness where you're not beholden to a single cautious bureaucracy. And while we often credit peace and cooperation as the conditions for progress, war and rivalry have arguably done more to accelerate technological advancement than any treaty ever has. Not because conflict is good, but because it's urgent. Rivalry compresses timelines and focuses minds. No one wants to be the civilization that missed the next great leap because their committee was still drafting its mission statement. Even in a peaceful age, competition in science and industry plays a similar role. Today's private space sector exists because companies saw an opportunity to outperform or underprice national programs. The diversity of launch systems, habitats, and exploration strategies we see emerging today would be impossible under a single global plan. A world unified under one set of priorities can too easily fall into complacency. Why take risks when you have no rival to outshine? There's also a more practical problem with unity: scale. As humanity spreads outward, communications delays grow. A message from Mars takes minutes to arrive, from the outer planets hours, and from another star system years or centuries. At some point, a single central authority stops being merely inefficient and becomes impossible. By the time someone on Earth finished debating a new interstellar policy, the colonies might already have changed governments, cultures, and even species. Attempts to enforce unity across that gulf would likely do more harm than good. A bureaucracy that insists on central oversight despite light lag risks paralysis, rebellion, or both. It's one thing for a government to issue new mining regulations to another continent. It's quite another to try governing a planet 20 light years away. Even the best-intentioned empire becomes oppressive when every decision arrives decades late. It's also one of our Fermi paradox solutions, the introduction bubble civilization or IBC, where a civilization sending out colony efforts begins noticing that it's having a harder and harder time maintaining control, and that it is arguably seeding the stars with threats to its own existence. No new friends or vassals, they are surrounding themselves on all sides with their mutant cousins, who benefit them not at all, and cost a lot of money to create and then to protect themselves from. So they crush any and all future expansion, and may even create a desolation zone around the inner core they can control. Beyond that, unity can stifle the very diversity that ensures long-term survival. Independent colonies might find new ways of living, governing, and adapting that no unified civilization would have tolerated or even imagined. Some will fail, yes, but failures of one won't doom them all. In contrast, a single centralized civilization is like a tree with one root system, strong while healthy but vulnerable to rot. We also tend to build this diversity even into unified entities. Governments usually have specialized departments that compete with each other for funding and prominence. Here in Ohio, we have a tug of war between powers the state retains against the federal government, but also the counties in Ohio for the state, and even small divisions with the counties. This is one approach of checks and balances that are designed to permit most of the benefits of unity while hopefully eliminating most of the problems within the process. Tyranny, resistance to change, and bureaucratic bloat usually be the big three. So while unity may seem like a sensible path at first, efficient, coordinated, stable, it can eventually turn to a liability, and probably even with FTL communication or travel too. Diversity, rivalry, and even a little tension are what keeps civilizations dynamic. Humanity's greatest risk might not be that we remain divided, but that we someday succeed in becoming too united for our own good. Case number 5. No, division is necessary. Some would go further still and argue that division isn't just inevitable, it's essential. From day one. Diversity is not a flaw in the human condition, it's the source of our strength. Our disagreements have shaped every tool, philosophy, and institution we've ever built, and if we ever stop disagreeing entirely, we may also stop improving. In evolutionary terms, variety is what keeps a species alive. Monocultures collapse when the environment shifts, but ecosystems endure through difference and redundancy, and infighting. A unified civilization might appear stronger, but it's also more fragile. One mistake, one bad policy, one false assumption can ripple across the entire system. Independent civilizations act as fire breaks. If one burns, others survive to rebuild. In space, that redundancy may be critical. Worlds and habitats will face unique challenges, from alien biochemistry to orbital mechanics. One awesome option space habitats have is they are inherently mobile. They don't have fixed neighbors except by tether, and they are easy to convert into decent spaceships. Unlike a modern nation, they can move if they want, and they can let a piece of themselves go without risking a strategic weakness. Letting each colony solve its problems its own way creates a library of experiments in survival. 1,000 civilizations spread across 1,000 worlds will be less efficient than one galactic empire, but far more enduring. Division also preserves meaning. A single standardized culture might achieve peace, but also risks becoming sterile. Independent societies can explore different philosophies, technologies, and moral frameworks, ensuring humanity's descendants remain adaptable not only in biology but in thought. In that sense, division is not weakness, it's the laboratory of the future. And in the far future, unity of all mankind is likely impossible as we spread out anyway, and attempts to keep it under one banner may retard expansion efforts or lead to us stuck as an IBC, limited to a tiny corner of what might be a whole galaxy or supercluster we could otherwise claim. Of course, division comes with costs, misunderstanding, conflict, even war, but total unity carries its own danger, the temptation to believe that one vision of the good should govern everyone, everywhere, forever. History has shown that this dream, however noble, rarely ends well. Diversity of civilizations may be the only check against the tyranny of certainty. Finding the middle path. So, does humanity need to be unified to survive and settle space? Probably not, but we can't afford total division either. Absolute unity, as in Case 1, risks stagnation and fragility. Absolute division, as in Case 5, risks chaos and collapse. The most realistic and arguably most hopeful path lies between them. A civilization that cooperates where it must, competes where it should, and leaves room for 1,000 different futures to unfold. The degree and type of unity and division is likely to shift with time, and again, at a certain size you may only be able to usefully have localized unity. Your nearest 100 light years of systems agree to a loose rule of trade and communication standards, for instance. That middle ground might look like a loose network of interdependent worlds, each free to choose its own destiny, yet bound by a few shared principles: mutual defense, non-aggression, communication, and respect for life. We might never march under one banner, but we can still move in roughly the same direction. Humanity's survival probably depends less on whether we stand together or apart, and more on whether we can remember why we're walking at all. Needless to say, this is a question with no final answer, and I'd love to hear your take. Do you think unity is humanity's best hope, or our greatest risk? Let us know down in the comments below, or join the discussion on our Facebook group, Reddit page, or Discord server, linked in our episode description. After all, debating big questions together, sometimes disagreeing passionately, is exactly what makes us human, and sometimes what makes thinking about space fun.